Welcome to 30 Minutes of Faith. We have with us a friend and co-worker today, an important part of interfaith in Sacramento, Myoho. Thank you for joining us. Will you tell us about where you were born and where you were raised and how you got started in life?
Oh my. Okay, I was born in Mulhouse, France. My parents were Hungarian. Both escaped during the war from Hungary and met in France, fell in love, married, and had my brother and I. And we came to this country when I was 4.
And are your parents alive?
No, they both passed away.
And how about your brother?
He's passed away too. I'm the only one left except for a couple of nieces and nephew. And
how'd you make your way to Sacramento?
Oh, it was a long journey. We moved to Michigan at first. When I was 21, I moved to New York. Lived there for a good 15 years, and I was then being drawn down to the West. And as I was coming down through the West, I encountered Navajo family that ultimately became like a family to me, and they still are. So I'm blessed with 2 families in this life. And when I was down there, I ended up getting into a car accident when I was in Southern California. Changed my life, and I was a field biologist back then. And so when I had an opportunity to come up here in Sacramento, my project coordinator, one of my project coordinators, had some work I could do while I was recovering, and I came up here and connected here to the Buddhist temple, the Koyasan temple on 14th and U, downtown. And since then, that practice has been speaking to me. I was Tibetan Buddhist early on in my life, and I was Buddhist all my life, but not always practicing. It was only when I went to Koyasan temple and that Kobadaishi, actually, the message came through to me in a very clear and beautiful way, and louder than it's ever been spoken before. So that's the practice that I've continued at.
Did your parents practice a religion?
Yes, I was raised Catholic. And actually, when I was a child, I was going to become a nun, a Catholic nun. I swore that to my mother, and I just felt very strong affinity. And she wanted to encourage me in different directions. She wasn't supportive so much of me becoming a nun at that stage. And as I grew older, I was always seeking the truth, I think, always looking for the absolute. And then I started to question about absolutes, because there's so many different languages of religion. And that's kind of what I see religion as, and always have, is that we all speak different languages. We just have to find the language that we understand and continue to communicate with that. And that it grows into faith that way.
I'll come back to Buddhism in a minute.
Sure.
The Navajo family, is that Arizona?
Yes, actually.
And do you still have contact with them?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Uh-huh.
Family is a wonderful thing.
Families are wonderful things all the way around, and you sometimes encounter them along your way in life.
Were you a happy child?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I was very much loved. I received, my father, of course, was a daddy's little girl type of thing, and they cared for us greatly. We had all our needs met. We never wanted for anything, really. We weren't rich, we were just comfortable, it was okay.
Now, before we came on the air, we talked about a couple of things, but cooking was one of them.
Oh.
Was your mother a good cook?
She was a great cook. She was wonderful.
And did you learn from her, or did you go somewhere to learn more cooking?
I learned from her, and it just when I see food, it combines easily. I guess like a mechanic puts a car together, anything in the kitchen I can put together pretty much.
A pinch here and a dash there and a spoon here.
Pretty much, yeah, and experiments, yeah.
My mother was a wonderful putter together of leftovers. She could take 3 or 4 days worth of leftovers and make just a wonderful meal.
Yeah.
And I have cousins and that who say they always like to come to our house because she made such wonderful things.
Yeah, that was my mother's house too.
Now, field biology.
Yes.
Let's talk about what specifically were you pursuing? Did you have a
I had a great opportunity when I went to Arizona. I was in social services and I was studying psychology when I went to the State University of New York at Stony Brook. And when I went to Arizona, I accidentally, serendipitously, happily fell into biology fieldwork, and it was so wonderful. I was a desert tortoise specialist. I started out with spotted owls and desert tortoises, and it was just fantastic, you know, to be in nature for great lengths of time, and that's one of the beauties of it. And then I ended up in a car accident, so that kind of cut short.
Do you still keep an eye on turtles and tortoises?
Oh, no, no, no. I left the field work. I had sustained some extreme injuries from that accident, and so it wasn't possible to really go back in the same capacity. So I went back to school.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've been told by quite a few people that Buddhism isn't really a religion. Would you agree with that?
Yes and no.
Okay.
And yes, in the sense that people follow it and practice it in such a way as to, as to be in a religious format. But the essence of Buddhism is actually a philosophy. It's a philosophy of life that can be applied to anyone of any religion. It doesn't matter who you are. Even atheists can apply Buddhist philosophy. It's bringing harmony between peoples, and that's the basic elements of it.
Are there people who would practice Buddhism and still go to the Catholic Church?
Oh, absolutely, all the time. I don't know if you, Thomas Merton, the monk.
Yes.
Yes, he traveled to the East, and he explored, Eastern philosophies. Meditation is such an intrinsic part of Buddhism, Buddhist practice, and every Buddhist sect, utilizes meditation in their teachings and in their everyday practice. It's very important. And Thomas Merton studied meditation. Saint Ignatius of Loyola also had meditation practices. And so these are not so, so far apart from the West. It's, there's cultural influences, of course, but, the philosophies of Buddhism, are universal and can be interpreted such.
You said you had practiced Tibetan.
I did for a period of time.
Have you been in Tibet?
No, I was never in Tibet. I was married several years ago and went up to a Buddhist monastery upstate New York, and went into retreat for about 5 days, and fasted. And I first encountered Buddhism when I was in karate when I was 16. And, it was something that I was very intrigued about, but I was still searching for truth. And I kept coming back to Buddhism. And so Tibetan Buddhism spoke to me at that time. But as I continued, I looked and said, oh, there's so many different ways of, applying this to life. How do I apply it in my own life?
The Potala Palace in Lhasa, Tibet.
Yes.
When we visited there several years ago, one of the things that I really, really liked is they had built that to start with out of adobe brick that wouldn't be too much bigger than a cinder block that we would use in America. But as the years passed, they would fill the cracks in with straw and a cement, and then they'd trim it, and then they would add more plaster, and then they, spring would come, they'd see the holes, and they'd fill it with straw and cement, and those walls that started out being 13 or 14 inches thick to start with are 6 or 7 or 8 feet thick. And it's a great and beautiful temple, and it's filled with peace and quiet and goodness.
How wonderful that you had that opportunity.
We thought it was one of the most wonderful things we'd ever seen, and to watch how over the hundreds of years they had, we have so many temples and churches that kind of get run down, and they just kept building up and making better and better, and there's a big courtyard up in the top. You can't see that from the ground, but there's several things up there that are just so peaceful and nice. We were sorry to leave. We spent 3 days, and we were sorry to have to leave there. What are you doing with your spare time these days?
That's an interesting combination of words. Spare time. I'm writing for an online publication right now. I write on Buddhism for Sacramento, and that's a current heart journey that's really very important, because we have, Sacramento is the most diverse city in America, obviously. We also have such great diversity of Buddhism. It's just the cultural, presence here is so extensive and so beautiful and wonderful. And, being from the East, Buddhism is connected with so many nations, Japan, Korea, Tibet, India, Burma, Thailand, Vietnam, and so on, Cambodia. They're all beautiful nations, and those cultures are here in Sacramento. And so and they arise inside of the temples, and the beautiful temples that there are. And the connection with those temples, everyone follows their own faith and follows within their own temple or church, of course. But it's so wonderful when everyone can come together. And this is my intention with my writing, is to present the different events, the different services, the different practices, the news, there's a calendar, and there's a monthly calendar that I write to show all the different events in the Buddhist communities throughout Sacramento. So I get excited about that.
Now, it seems to me when I was a boy, even as a teenager and later going off the military, the Eastern religions were sort of exactly that. They were in the East, and they were far removed, and we had some periphery to them. But that's not necessarily true anymore, is it?
No, I think, well, of course the East is still in the East, but I mean, it's integrated into our culture just like we are a melting pot nation. So many cultures are here, and the East is here as well. You can find the flavors, the energy, and the faith of the East coming through. And that's wonderful because it merges with the West. And, there's a wonderful, beautiful growth in that, I think, for all the faiths coming together. I mean, this is why I so appreciate ICGS. This is what it stands for, is to have our languages of faith coming together, to have greater understanding so we don't have so much misunderstanding and so much conflict and anger with one another. I believe there can be peace, and peace comes from our hearts. But it also comes from our other senses. We have to use our ears to hear, our eyes to see, and our mouths to speak. We have to communicate with one another about who we are. And that's why, this forum is so wonderful too, this opportunity. Buddhism is just a great, direction and path. It walks along many other paths. And I believe that the truth is in all of us, in all of our faiths. We just have to respect one another and how we express it.
Thanks for the plug for Interfaith, by the way. A week or two ago, I was in a place with a couple of faith leaders, and we talked about focusing on similarities and not the differences. And one of them said to me, "Well, that's not very politically correct, but it's a really good approach. I really like it." And I drove home that day, thought, well, politically approach and be danged, I think if we can focus on the truth is in all of us and that we have similarities, that works really, really well. Tell us more about Buddha.
Buddha?
Yes.
Well, Buddha was born a little over 2,600 years ago. Actually, this year was a celebration of 2,600th year. And Vesak, or Visakha, or Visayak, it's all the meaning the same thing, and it's a celebration in the springtime of the birth, the enlightenment, and the death of Buddha. Now, he lived for 80 years, so the thing is that he reached all those things at the same time of year, or at the same time, so it's all celebrated.
My wife and I went to a celebration of that this spring and spent a night, and the following morning was a wonderful time.
Oh, it is. It's this year actually there was a great event that happened that's going to be now annually, where like a dozen different Buddhist temples and organizations came together and planned the Vesak. So when Buddha was born, you know, there were many things I can tell you about it. He was, you know, born to a wealthy family. He was a prince, and he learned about, you know, when he went out into the world, he learned about old age, sickness, and death. And he also learned about the ascetic that goes off and, you know, finds and seeks enlightenment. So he went off and he left all the wealth and the opulence and went into the world for that. So when he was enlightened under the Bodhi tree, he saw things that his teachings that were passed down to us, and that's what Buddhism is about, is just those simple teachings that he shared with us. And he died in peace at 80. So that celebration of the birth, the enlightenment, and death comes together in Vesak. And for this spring, when those dozen, I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping around, I'm sorry. I jumped around a little bit.
No problem. Owen is a good editor.
Well, this spring at the Vesak in Sacramento, the dozen or so organizations and temples of Buddhism came together in Sacramento. They put on this Vesak, but it was, you know, the first time that it was really this cohesively done and this greatly done, because it brought together the flavors of all these different Asian cultures and the teachings of Buddha from great teachers who attended. So there were so many things, the music, the foods, and everything. So that's a great celebration. I hope people will come to in Sacramento in next spring at the Vesak. So
that was not only enlightening and a fine teaching moment, but it was also peaceful and respectful and, you know, delightful.
Oh, when you went, where did you go to?
In Carmichael.
Ah, okay. Which temple?
Sorry, I don't remember the name.
That's okay.
They mailed us an invite, and we kind of decided on the spur of the moment, let's go over on Friday night and Saturday morning. We had a wonderful experience, and they taught us a lot of good things. We were really glad we had attended.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I'm happy to hear you had that experience. You know, when people get the opportunity, that's another thing about my column, is I've tried to give information about the different temples and the events, but to let people know that you don't, you know, a lot of people I think are afraid to walk into a Buddhist temple because it's from a different culture. And I think they're uneasy about what they should do or what's proper in that. But it's very easy to walk in with respect for the temple and for the practice, you know, to understand that you can experience that. You can go to meditate at Buddhist temples around Sacramento. Most everyone I've spoken to welcomes people to come in and sit and meditate, and many of them have services in English. So, and many of them are American, like for Sacramento Buddhist Meditation Group or the Valley Stream Zen Center, Zen Sangha rather, Sacramento Insight Meditation. These are Western groups that are emerging. So there's a Western Buddhism that's also evolving from all of the Eastern influences. And that needs to be recognized, and more and more people are realizing that.
One of the things that happens in my life is I faith hop, and it's not unusual to be in 2 or 3 places in an afternoon and an evening. The only downside of that is 2 weeks later I remember being there, but who did I talk to while I was there, and what was I doing specifically? Would you say that the practice of Buddhism has a wonderful future?
Oh my goodness. Yes, in fact, we're waiting. The Maitreya Buddha is, you know, something, is the Buddha of the future. So the teachings from Maitreya will be coming too. There's absolutely, Buddhism goes through time. There's endless times of Buddhas that have come. Buddha is not only a physical presence, but a universal presence. So, yes, Buddhism, the teachings are universal, of course.
Now I'm going to ask you sort of a surprise question. I don't really expect you to know the answer because I've asked 4 or 5 other people. In China, we went down into a grotto, and there was a large cave, and it had 6 Buddhas down one side, 3 across the front of the room and 6 more coming down the other side, so that it looked like a, you know, a presidency with 12 Buddhas. They were all distinctly painted in different colors. They had different expressions on their face. I mean, they were distinct 15 men. Do you have any idea what that would be?
Do you know what part of China?
It was out in the central part, out by Wuhan, where Chairman Mao was born and raised. It was a beautiful place, and it had been there for 2,000 years. It had only been uncovered and discovered in the 1950s or 60s or something, but it was a beautiful thing, and we were fascinated. They had lots of other things carved in the walls and in the rocks of this grotto, but in this cave obviously was the leadership room, it looked like, and that fascinated us. We asked everybody we could around there. No one knew the significance of that, and I've thought about it a lot. It looked like where the fathers would come together to decide what would be best for the people.
I'm personally at this moment I'm not sure, but I can certainly find out for you.
I wish you'd look into that.
I will definitely look into it.
I'll try to email you a picture of it.
Oh, that would be wonderful, because I can definitely get the information for you then.
I stood back at the opening and took a flash. It turned out pretty well.
We have many Chinese Buddhist temples here in groups, so the answer will be forthcoming.
Do you study much of the history of Buddhism, or are you focused sort of on the here and now?
Oh, no. We understand, you know, where Buddha comes from, his history. You know, as a Buddhist, you learn the things along the way, of course, and then you focus on the teachings that you follow, because it's good to have a teacher to guide you in Buddhism, not just to read books and things. It's always good to have someone who can lead you.
Who comes to Buddhism? I mean, is it a high school boy or girl, or do people in their middle age, or even if they're getting elderly, who comes to Buddhism?
Everyone. There's no demarcation on that. It's just everyone is welcome, of any, you know, way, shape, or form, of any life or lifestyle or history. You know, because Buddhism just is a path that you can follow that, you know, has many, many directions, just like we have in life. So anyone can come, anyone. And again, as I say, anyone of any faith can just practice. You know, of course, within a temple or church, they're going to be teaching from where they're from or what the background is. But it doesn't mean that someone can't sit there and meditate. I can go into another temple and I'll still see my teacher there. You know, the masters, the icons that I follow, that I connect with. And as I'm sure for you too, you know, we take our faith with us. But when we're in a faithful environment, it can bring that much clearer for us when we can practice in peace.
Is there an administrative headquarters? I mean, in the United States, is there some place that's central that teachers and masters would look to?
There are, you know, groups of, you know, Buddhists, but I mean, mostly everything is done within the temple or their connection to the country of origin, if they come from another country, or if they organize here. For example, with my sect, the sect that I follow is Shingon-shu, and it comes from Japan. Its headquarters are in Koyasan, on Mount Koya in Japan, and we, you know, get all our directives. We don't have a great many temples here where it's a very old sect, but, you know, so many of the other sects you know, have their own directions, you know, their own affiliations. So the headquarters are very diverse.
The teachers or masters who would lead at a particular gathering place, are they, these are my words, but are they a paid ministry?
Well, they are taken care of by their community.
But they don't leave on Sunday and go teach school somewhere or work for the state of California.
You know, it varies so much
Okay.
because of the different practices. Like, there are two major schools in Buddhism, Theravada and Mahayana. And Theravada follows, it's more of a basic, fundamental direction, following Buddha's teachings exactly. And very simple, like, for example, Tibet, Japan, China, Korea, they're Mahayana, which means they are a little bit more progressive. They have saints and deities. And, you know, by the way, Buddhism is not simply a polytheistic, because that's not how we look at it. Buddha is everything, everywhere. But anyway, what I was going to say is that the teachers that come from those traditions are very different. You know, some of them will go out into the communities, and there's a lot of work that's done within the communities to help the communities that they're from.
What will happen after you die?
I'm reincarnated.
And do you have an idea of where you will be?
No, but in this life, my purpose is to strive towards enlightenment and live in the pure way and the teachings of Buddha for the benefit of all people, of all beings.
Are you making good progress?
I hope so. I'm a monk. I took my vows as a monk in 2009, and I continue to live as a monk and share the Dharma with people, and to join in the communities of Buddha. We have three jewels. It's the Buddha, the Dharma, which is the teachings, and the Sangha, which is the community. It goes farther than that, but that's a simple form.
And how do you spend most of your time in the community?
Currently, I'm visiting the different temples. I try to write about them, to to bring more information about them to the Sacramento community, for not only Buddhists, but for all the people in Sacramento, to feel welcome to come to Buddhist temples and to Buddhist events, and to learn more about the teachings and share with one another.
How would we find your blog?
Well, I'm with the Sacramento Examiner currently, and it'll be expanding a bit, but if people want to find it, it's on Sacramento Buddhist Examiner. It's a long website, so just Google Sacramento Buddhist Examiner, and you'll be able to find the writings and the imagery.
It's nice to have visited with you. Thank you for taking the time. I know that wasn't the most comfortable thing in your life. Thank you for doing that. It's nice to have you, and
Thank you,
this
John.
will help the people in Sacramento understand better.
Thank you, and I wish you many blessings,
Thank
John.
you.
Thank you for your time as well.